Well, if you're harmless, you're not virtuous. You're just harmless. You're like a rabbit. A rabbit isn't virtuous. It just can't do anything except get eaten. It's not virtuous. If you're a monster and you don't act monstrously, then you're virtuous. But you also have to be a monster. Well, you see this all the time. Harry Potter's like that too. It's like he's flawed, he's hurt, he's got evil in him. He can talk to snakes, man. He breaks rules all the time. All the time. He's not obedient at all. But you know, he has a good reason for breaking the rules. And if he couldn't break the rules, him and his little clique of rule-breaking, you know, troublemakers, if they didn't break the rules, they wouldn't attain the highest goal. So it's very peculiar, but it's a very, very common mythological notion. You know, the hero has to be a monster, but a controlled monster. Batman is like that, you know. I mean, it's everywhere. It's the story you always hear. One question is, you know, you're kind of implicitly moral insofar as you're socialized. But that's sort of procedural, it's just built into you. This is different. This is also becoming conscious of it and expanding out your personality into dimensions that it wouldn't normally occupy. So this happens to people all the time. So, for example, lots of my clients, my clinical clients, are too agreeable. And they're generally women, because women are more agreeable than men, but not always, because I've had agreeable men as clients as well. And what happens is they're resentful and they don't know how to stand up for themselves, and it's because they're very compassionate by nature. And so if you're entering into a negotiation with them, they'll let you win. Well, that's not so good, because you know, you need to win too. Especially if you're in an organization of adults where there's a struggle, right? When you have kids, you can let them win, especially infants. You have to let them win, and that's partly why compassion is so necessary. But as a basis for negotiation between adults, it's like, sorry, it's insufficient. You have to be a bit of a monster so that you can say no. And so a lot of what you do in psychotherapy is treat people's anxiety and depression. That's a huge chunk of it. Help them straighten out the way they think. That's a huge chunk of it. But another chunk of it is, well, let's toughen you up. Let's put you in a position where you can bargain. Let's teach you how to assert yourself and stand up for yourself, and that's assertiveness training, and it's a huge chunk of psychotherapy. And you need to learn it. It's like, because part of how you regulate your interactions with other people is to negotiate. And you cannot negotiate unless you can say no. You can't do it. And it causes conflict to say no, and if you don't like conflict, which is basically the definition of being agreeable, then you can't tolerate the conflict, and so then you can't negotiate on your own behalf, and so then you keep losing, and you're bullied, and it's not good. Then you get resentful, and it's really not good. So you have to develop your inner monster a little bit, and then that makes you a better person, not a worse person. It isn't so straightforward to determine what our place is in the world. And the thing that really got me with regards to that wasn't the good that we could do, but the harm that we can do. Because you can debate about the good we can do, but you cannot debate about the harm we can do. That's done. We know, if we want to know. And I think my experience was, when I took that seriously, which meant understanding how that was about me, about that Auschwitz was about me, and that the Stalinist camps were about me, then, well, that reorients you. That's a deep part of the shadow idea, right? And I think that is part of the idea of taking the sins of the world onto yourself. It's like, you're a human being, so you see what human beings do. That's you. And you might say, well, I'd never do that. It's like, don't be so sure about that. In fact, the probability that you're wrong is extraordinarily high. It isn't self-evident that the default position is heroism in the face of the advance of evil. In fact, quite the contrary. So it's highly probable that you would be on the side of the weak who are transformed into oppressors. And that's a very terrifying realization if you take it seriously, which you should. And I do believe that if we don't take that with sufficient seriousness, we are not going to survive, because we're too powerful to be naive. And that was something that Jung insisted on, especially after the invention of the hydrogen bomb in particular. It's like, if you're going to play with fire, you better be a master of fire.
What are the prerequisites for true knowledge and understanding? Because it seems to me that intelligence is only a small matter of seeing and understanding properly, and it takes a certain amount of moral courage. It takes a certain amount of having done the work of introspection, having done the work of deep introspection. What do you think the components are for true knowledge and understanding?
Well, I think the motivation, one of the best motivations, is existential terror. I don't remember where this is in the Old Testament, but the line is, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And that's definitely psychologically true, but we could strip it, say, of its transcendent implications and say, well, for me anyways, I wasn't motivated to be serious until I knew what I was capable of in the most negative way. Because you don't take yourself seriously until you know that you are an evil monster. And you don't take that seriously until you know what that means. And so, but once you know what that means, especially if you find that out consciously, say, then you're in a position to start taking yourself seriously enough so that you might be willing to learn what you need to learn to become wise. You have to see yourself as an Auschwitz camp guard, and you have to see yourself enjoying it. And that can't just be an exercise in intellectual simulation, precisely. It has to be a dramatic experience. You have to feel that in your bones. And then you have to decide, and you have to give the devil his due. There's something very attractive about predatory power. And you might even say that it's preferable to pathetic weakness. Now, I'm not saying that, but you could make a case that it is. Because you could say that the person who's pathetically weak would like to be a predatory tyrant, but just doesn't have the ability. And that's a Nietzschean criticism of standard morality, I would say. But then, is there something higher than predatory power? Well, yes. Part of Christ's encounter with Satan in the desert is precisely that realization, because he's offered the kingdom of the world. And that means he's offered the option of tyrannical power. And his response to that is, there's something better. And that's wisdom. There is something better. And there's no reason not to go for what is the best. What else? You don't have anything better to do than that by definition, right? So why not work for the betterment of being and abandon your resentment and your hatred of humanity and your self-contempt and take on the responsibility of the horrors and catastrophes of human existence, and do what you can to, well, at least not make it worse, but maybe to make it better. You know you can. You know you can make it worse and better. You just don't know how much. Find out. It might be way more than you think. I'm sure that's the case. So there isn't any more interesting adventure than that. Find out how much good you can do in the world. And not in this moralistic, thou shalt not way, but in a forthright, noble, courageous, eyes wide open, articulate, embodied manner. And then God only knows where we could get. So
let's see.
Let's find out. That would be good. It's certainly better than the alternative.